Well, hello, year six. Look what I've managed to get. Well, and also, look what else I also have. Mojams at the ready. I wonder who might win these. Let's just see. There is, of course, only me in the class right now, although I'm not obviously in the class. So, let me begin. We're on page 251 on Friday. The weight of Sycorax's disappointment was so depressing that Wish could feel herself drooping like her fingers were made of lead. Be merciful, thought Sycorax to herself, as Wish melted miserably in front of her. I suppose the child can't help looking like a weird little twig that somebody accidentally trod on. I suppose she can't help lolloping about the place like an unbalanced bunny rabbit. A queen should be gracious as well as severely and incorruptibly just. A queen must be forgiving, as well as unbendingly and unswervingly firm. Sycorax controlled herself with a strong effort. I suppose, said Queen Sycorax, gritting her teeth, you did your best. However inferior that best might be. How is your headache? Thinking of physical and mental weakness? A headache, said Wish blankly, before remembering hurriedly that she had told her mother she was going to bed early with a headache, so she could sneak out after the spoon. Oh, the headache's much better, Mother, thank you, said Wish. And how are you finding learning how to be a warrior? It's quite difficult. Queen Sycorax sighed with exasperation. Madam Dreadlock says that your spelling is going... Oh, that's the wrong accent. We do this. I need you in class. I can't do this. Madam Dreadlock says that your spelling is going particularly badly. Reading and writing is a sign of how superior and civilized we warriors are. You know, Wish? Come on. I know, but the thing with the spelling is the letters, they just don't stay still, explained Wish. They just keep wandering about in my head, and I forget what order they were in the first place. There are some people, Wish suggested bravely, who think, ma'am, that spelling it might not be as important as the things you're trying to spell. Now, obviously, she's Scottish, Geordie, and mother is Geordie, remember. Well, now see, those people are mad, said Queen Sycorax. You'll just have to try a bit harder, love. Harder, won't you? Starting with your appearance, look at you. Wish was looking even more than usually bedraggled. Cloak on inside out and back to front. Ripped clothes, twigs all over the place. Hair whipped up into frenzied knots from when Squeeze Juice had made a nest out of it earlier. Even a substandard warrior like yourself always should be well turned out, Wish, said Queen Sycorax, sweeping away. Every hair in its place, every weapon sharpened, every fingernail shining like a shiny new penny. Remember that, I told you before. And just as Queen Sycorax was sailing off, in a rustle of long, gracious white skirts, a certain knot that attached a little iron key to the belt she wore around her waist undid itself, like a small snake uncoiling, and the key dropped to the floor. It was a very tiny key, so as it dropped onto the stone flagstones, it made a very tiny noise that the Queen did not hear. She disappeared round the corner, not knowing she'd lost it. Ting! Wish, looking after her mother dejectedly, heard the noise. She picked up the key. She opened her mouth to say, Mother, you've dropped your key. And then she shut it again. The key was small and black and cold. The hair stood up on the back of Wish's neck as she realised it was the key not only to every room in the warrior fort, but to her mother's dungeons. How strange that Queen Sycorax should lose it at that precise, particular moment. Did it drop or did it jump? If you were a fanciful person, you might have said... What might you have said? that it was almost as if the key were looking for Wish and wanted her to use it. But we're not fanciful people, and that would be ridiculous. Chapter 15. Breaking into Queen Sycorax's dungeon. Wish and Bodkin and Bumbleboozle tried to sneak down into Sycorax's dungeons in the daytime, but it was impossible. There were too many people around. "We'll have to wait until everyone goes to bed," said Wish. "But how are we going to get past the sentry guarding the entrance to my mother's dungeons?" "I has a great sleeping spell. Let me put him to sleep," squeaked Bumbleboozle. "Your spells won't work here, I'm afraid, Bumbleboozle," said Wish. Bodkin looked guilty. I still think that this is a terrible idea," he said, "but just in case you wanted to go through with it, I put a small sleeping draught in the sentry's serving of wild boar stew when I was serving him dinner. Once magic people aren't the only ones who know something about herb work." "Oh, Bodkin, thank you," said Wish in delight. "No, don't thank me," said Bodkin gloomily. "My father would be very disappointed in me. I just felt sorry for that poor little squeeze juice, but I should be able to overcome my personal weakness and do the right thing. I don't know what's come over me." So late that night, Wish and Bodkin crept down to the great door, which was the entrance to Queen Sycorax's dungeons. The sentry who was supposed to be guarding it had fallen fast asleep, so they tiptoed past him, unlocked the door with Sycorax's key, and slipped in, soft as shadows, closing the door behind them. As the door shut, Bodkin had a suffocating feeling of panic. Sycorax's dungeons tended to have that effect on people. "You stay here, Bumbleboozle," said Wish, "so you can come and warn us if my mother or anyone else comes after us." "Okay," squeaked Bumbleboozle. The small, hairy fairies were always extremely pleased to be given a role, and she was delighted not to have to go any further. For in the centre of the room they were standing in was the true entrance to the dungeons, a great pit with a movable platform hanging above it. Bodkin stared into the pit. "We're going to have to go down there, aren't we?" he said, pathetically hoping somehow Wish might say no. "Yep," said Wish, climbing onto the platform. "Goodbye," whispered Bumbleboozle. "Good luck. It was nice knowing you. For big people, you're kind of less smelly than most." Thank you," said Bodkin. Shakily, he climbed on the platform, and Wish untied the rope and gradually let it out, and down, down, down they went, the temperature dropping like a stone, as did Bodkin's heart as the platform lowered deeper, even deeper into the underground. You see, it's like they're being lowered into a well. I wonder what that reminds you of. Reminds me of a well. Not that I've ever been lowered into a well, but if I was, that's what it would remind me of. Wish's heart was sinking too, for coming down here felt like not only a betrayal, but also a trespass. Sycorax would have secrets here because, well, a queen must have secrets, and Sycorax did have secrets. All of Sycorax's secrets were hidden underground. Wish knew that. And she also knew that she really, really didn't want to find out what those secrets were. But she had no choice. Down, down, down. They went deeper, even deeper. When the platform finally came to a soft landing, what seemed like a horribly long time later, they landed in the secret midnight world of the prisons of Queen Sycorax, buried in 100 yards of stone and earth, deep below the Warrior Hill fort. Wish and Bodkin stepped off the platform into a grim little chamber, with a steady drip, drip of water coming from the ceiling, and lit by dim and guttering torchlight. There were no fewer than 7 corridors leading off the chamber. Sycorax's dungeons were on the site of what in ancient times had been a mine. So they were haunted not only by the prisoners of the present, but the giant and dwarf and human miners of the past. Mine had turned to prison, and the dungeons were now a great spreading maze like a gigantic long spider's web, with corridors meandering and crossing over each other in trickily confusing fashion, just like the tortuous maze of tricky Queen Sycorax's mind. Off these corridors were endless little chambers, some with prisoners in them, some with, other things. But how were Bodkin and Wish to know which way to go? "And what's that noise?" whispered Bodkin. Sycorax's dungeons, as I mentioned earlier, were always filled with noise, an iron music of despair and sweetness all mixed together. For longing does have its own sweetness, and beautiful things can come out of pain. The once magic people imprisoned in those underground regions could no longer perform magic. They could not work their spells, the sprites could not fly, the giants were very slowly shrinking. For in one of the secret cells, in the lowest, deepest chamber of all, was Sycorax's stone that takes away magic. And they had all been taken there, and they had all touched the stone, and lost the magic that made them what they were. They were then led back to their cells, and kept there, until they readjusted, and got used to life without their magic. No one had got quite used to it yet, and so the once magic people who were living there filled the dungeons with noise. Melancholy noise, angry noise, regretful noise, the sound of the stamping feet of ogres treading in sad, slow circles, the howling of werewolves, the songs of sprites, singing in high, eerie voices about the bright old days. It was the one thing they could do now. They had lost their wings, their spells, their hopes. They had lost their sight, their light, for when the magic went from sprites, their colour faded, the inner light that burned so bright flickered and died. But still they made their noise. They were brought iron spoons and iron dinner plates to eat from, and they clasped their iron in their no longer magic fists or paws, and they tapped out a melancholy beat that drummed through the prison like the ache of a long-lost love. When Wish and Bodkin entered the dungeons, they could hear the song of a sprite called the Once Sprite, who was standing on the shoulder of Crusher, the giant, locked in one of Sycorax's cells. For Wish had been right. Crusher had indeed been captured by Queen Sycorax's warriors when Zar had left him behind in the clearing of the forest. And here Crusher the giant was now, hidden somewhere in Queen Sycorax's dungeons, his eyes closed, thinking great thoughts and hoping against hope that Zar would come and save him. Meanwhile, on his shoulder, the Once Sprite was singing of one particular bright blue of a summer's day, when he flew up, and slept on the wing like a swift, allowing the air currents of the atmosphere to be his bed, so high that the last thing he saw as he fell asleep was the many islands of Albion spread out below him, the forest reaching from sea to sea. And he sang it so beautifully that all the inhabitants of that underground chamber thought that they could see it too, and joined in the song of lost magic, stamping, beating an iron beat in time with the giant's great beating heart, as if they were up there in the skies, not down, buried deep, lost and forgotten, landlocked forever. Poor Squeeze Juice! Was this to be his fate too? Once you have heard the song of lost magic, you'd never forget it. The confusion of emotions in that song, the despair, the hope, the regret, coupled with the exquisite recreation of the magic world and the powers that the once magic people realized in the moment of losing they had lost, and the way they echoed down the corridors, repeating and mirroring and bouncing off the warren of walls, created a maze of noise and emotions and moral choices at least as disorientating and overwhelming as the physical maze itself. Have we done right? Have we done wrong? Sang the songs. What have we lost? But had we no choice? And this song rang into other songs about the beauty of the wildwoods at midnight, where only the eyes of magic could see in the dark, the formation of hair ice on the elder tree twigs as the first deep forest of winter came to the forest, and cyclamen buds, deep violet and leafless, pushing their ways through the earth, and the discarded autumn leaf clutter from the trees above, too quiet for dull human eyes to see their slow growing, but clear as daylight for the eyes of magic. And it wasn't even certain which were the songs of living people and what were the songs of long-dead ghosts of the once magic people imprisoned in these warrens long ago, whose voices had sunk and frozen into the walls, only to be ricocheted back into life again by the slicing blow of a present sound wave, as if the spirits of the long-dead goblin and hob-elf and she-dwarf miners were still there, picking the sounds out of the walls with their enchanted axes, and sending the songs off on their way again, so that they were alive once more in the ears of Bodkin and Wish. Ah, yes, it was a strange haunted place, that underground prison where magic and iron and past and present, good and evil were being held together in a much more complicated and contradictory manner than you might expect from Sycorax's confident iron hill fort standing so proudly above them. "We have no map," said Wish, covering his ears, for the noise was so muddling it made it difficult to think, let alone make any clear choices. He had already explored down one of the corridors and found in a split in another 2 directions at the end of it. "How are we ever going to find where she's imprisoned, sir? We're never going to locate him in a maze as big as this one." "A maze can be as effective as locks and keys if you were trying to hide something." Wish and Bodkin walked around the chamber in despair for a while before the enchanted spoon noticed something down at the bottom of one of the unlit black corridors. A tiny sprinkle of light blinking on and off like a remote star. The spoon rapped Wish gently on the head to get her attention, and then tip-tapped his way along the corridor to draw her attention to the little pool of light. Wish felt her way after the spoon, with Bodkin saying, "Where are you going?" and following her reluctantly. And when she had reached the bright little particle, she could see another patch, way in the distance, beckoning her like weirlight. Sprite dust. Zara must have sprinkled sprite dust along the way so we could follow him. "That's clever," said Wish. So on they went, feeling their way towards the distant sprinkles of light, deeper and deeper, losing themselves in the twisting corridors of Sycorax's dungeons. "It must be somewhere around here," said Bodkin, as they came to a long corridor with at least 25 rooms coming off it. "We'll just have to check every room." "Do we have to?" said Wish. "It's all very well for you. It's your mother. But I feel really weird finding things out about my mother that I really do not want to know." And I'm going to leave it there. This is a picture of the dungeons, the corridors, and the light. Please remind me, we are on page 266. Because, as you all know, I will forget. I will be back tomorrow. Hopefully you will see this. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Hope you're all doing swimmingly well, and I miss you loads. Bye.